I would like to welcome you to Twitter for increasing student-to-student interactions. That is the topic of today's webinar. This is going to be a fast-paced webinar, a 30-minute webinar, and I'm going to be taking you through several slides and also be integrating an opportunity for you to interact with Twitter depending on where you are with Twitter right now. I realize we're going to have some different experience levels, and so I'd actually like to take this opportunity to get to know your experience level a little bit with Twitter. So I've got a couple of questions for you, and give me just a second to get this set up. You should see a poll on your screen right now, and if you could respond to the poll on your screen, I'm going to show you the results as they come in. You'll see the percentages, and I just want to get a feel for how many of you actually have a Twitter account right now. And it looks like all of you have a Twitter account, so that's fabulous because I'm going to give you an opportunity to actually do some tweeting during the session today, but it was important for me to know whether or not you actually have a Twitter account because that would make it a more effective activity if you did or not. So let me stop that and let me go over to my next poll that I want to do, take a look at here. Do you currently or have you in the past used Twitter in teaching? And so for that one, we have a split vote. So half of you have and half of you haven't. So that's actually cool too. So what I would encourage you to do is, for those of you who have, I would love to have you participate and share some thoughts about how it went. And some of you are kind of, it looks like we've still got some votes coming in. Share some thoughts about how it went, you know, some of the, maybe the opportunities for improving, some of the bright spots. And those of you who haven't, great opportunity to learn from those with this type of experience, and also take a look at some of the resources that I'm going to share. And we definitely want to have this be interactive and have you share your experiences through the back channel. So with that said, one of the tools, I'm going to be actually sharing a variety of tools with you towards the latter part of the webinar, but one of them that you may or may not be aware of that makes using hashtags really, really simple. We're going to talk more about hashtags for those of you who may not be too familiar with them. This is a fabulous tool. It's called TweetChat. And I am going to send out a link to the TweetChat room for the faculty eCommons. And I'm putting it right now in the chat box over on the left side of the screen. And for those of you who are interested, if you click on that right now, it's going to open up in a new window for you. And you'll have to log into your Twitter account. But basically, it allows for you to interact in a real clean, simple space without interacting and having to set up a search in Twitter itself. And actually, what I'll do here, I'm going to share the screen and show it to you later on. I'm going to let those of you who want to play with it now and interact do that as I'm going through the webinar, and then we'll shift over to it later and share the screen and kind of see the interactions as a group. Okay? So I'm just going to let that be for now, let it simmer. And I also am very interested in having anyone who wants to ask questions or share experiences through the chat box on the left. That would be great as well. So when we start thinking about online teaching, of course what we want to think about ahead of time before we even get to the teaching part of it is effective online course design. And that's really where everything starts, is the way we put together our online courses. And effective online course design really calls forth for thinking about three variables of online engagement. When it comes to online engagement, those three variables are the for effective online engagement are student-instructor interaction, which is really, I think, what online instructors get most effectively. You know, student-to-instructor interaction, that's really the primary focus that I think most online instructors understand and master. And then we move into student-to-content interaction and then student-to-student interaction. And it's this third element that is really so very critical to taking online learning to the next level, because it's when we can really foster these very effective student-to-student interactions that we see what's referred to as social presence start to flourish in an online class. And all of us know what social presence is, because we don't even have to think about it in an online class environment. We can go back to face-to-face classes and very simply make these very, very personalized connections to what social presence is. Social presence is simply the concept of understanding someone else as a real human. And so if we just put aside the concept of online teaching for a minute and think about your face-to-face classes, because regardless of where we are with online teaching experiences, we have all had face-to-face learning experiences. And I think for me, sometimes that's even more fundamentally tangible to relate to as teachers and as learners. And when we think back to those experiences, you know, there are just some classes, face-to-face classes, at whatever level we were in the learning experience, where we just connected in the classroom with other people, where we just felt like we could be real people with our peers, right? And at the end of the class, maybe we got a little teary-eyed and we really felt like, wow, I'm really going to miss those people. And those are the classes where the learning really grew into deep, deep learning. It became relevant. You made connections. You remembered stuff for the rest of your life. And so when we transition that into the online environment, those are the types of interactions we want to foster, we want to see blossom in the online environment. So the question becomes, how do we make that happen? How do we make people, how do we make learners connect with each other and really pick up social presence and see it blossom into that type of interconnectedness and have humans connect with each other on a human level? Now for me, what I see is a pretty significant difference between the types of interactions that occur when we're using strictly tools within our LMS, and then when we start to sprinkle in or enhance the learning with tools that are mobile. And I'm going to pause for just a moment because I see a question here from Peggy. You've asked if you can share the link to the Google Doc, and the question is absolutely. You feel free to share. That actually says that right at the top. It says feel free to share this with this link at the top. So the LMS tools versus the mobile tools, and this is something that I really want to encourage you to reflect on as an educator and experiment with on your own, because I really think it's something you need to feel comfortable with and kind of evaluate on your own. But what I found is that the more we can put the tools in the hands of students, I should say not in the hands, in the pockets of learners, so that the tools are with them at all times, so that when they have a thought, when they see a connection in life to their content, when they find a resource, right? Or maybe they make an observation, or they're talking to someone and they say, you know, what you just said really reminds me of ... They can take out their phone and they can share it with their learners. And those are the types of real-time, just-in-time connections that can happen when you're using a tool like Twitter. And they can be shared back at any point in time in just a minute or two. And so that's pretty effective. So I think when I look at what mobile does, it starts to melt the social connections down and like a trickle-down effect into a more intimate level. So that's the type of difference that I see when we start to enhance the online class with mobile tools, in addition to the tools that we're using within our LMS. So Twitter. For those of you in the call right now, you don't need an introduction. For those of you watching the archive, you might need a little bit more of an introduction. So Twitter is a free microblogging tool. You can send updates and tweets that are 140 characters or less, and sometimes that makes educators, just kind of squinch and think, oh, 140 characters or less, how could that be academic? But there's some really interesting and compelling arguments about how that can really force students to think very clearly about what it is that they're trying to say. And I have felt myself have to do that. Now, I have also felt myself, honestly spell things incorrectly to fit them into that box. But, it's a compelling argument to think about. Those updates, by the way, can include links to blogs, articles, videos, photos, and etc. So don't think about them just as 140 characters. Think about them as these kind of rich resources that can be shared, and fostering these deeper connections throughout the web. Those updates could be sent from a laptop, from a smartphone, and there's a variety of apps that can be leveraged to make that sharing experience more effective. And I encourage you to share with each other what tools you use to make that more effective. And they can also be shared via text message. Some people don't realize that. So if, for example, you are working with a student who doesn't have a smartphone but wants to actually be tweeting from his or her phone, you can go into your Twitter account and actually connect a Twitter account to a cell phone number, and that actually allows you to send tweets from a phone. But you do need to be sure that, or you do need to let the person know, or be sure the person knows that text messaging rates do apply, right? So if they don't have unlimited texting, that's something to be aware of. And it's also important, if you're working with students, that you make it clear that all updates are public. We shouldn't be assuming that students always know that just because they're using a tool like Twitter, they know that what they're sending is visible to the world. So I would always tell students, if you're going to put it on Twitter, remember, you're screaming it from the rooftops, right? So we need to be really effectively modeling to students what digital literacy skills are. Tweeting the Night Away is an article that I've shared with you in Tweeting the Night Away is an article I shared with you in the goodie bag, and I'm going to share some actual quotes from the article with you that Dunlap and Lowendahl have extracted from the results of their case study. And I had to take quotes. Normally I don't really like to actually read. Part of my screen is actually being covered here, so I'm going to let you read the first one because I'm actually not able to see it on my end, which is a little strange, but that's just the way it is. And I know you're all fully capable of reading. I was just going to say I don't really like to read things anyway to my audience, although it does really make things a little bit more accessible and in line with universal design for learning. But these extracts from the article are fabulous pieces of evidence that start to demonstrate how after they integrated Twitter into their online course, they're seeing evidence of how it started to foster these interactions between students. So the second bullet point here says, a student finds a great video about storyboarding on YouTube and points the URL to Twitter, or posts the URL to Twitter. Her find is retweeted or reposted 3 times because others also think the video is great and worth sharing. A student tweets that he just posted a new entry to his blog on how vision trumps all of the senses during instruction and provides the URL. His classmates, as well as other practicing professionals, read his blog post. He receives 3 tweets thanking him for sharing his ideas. So in addition to, I think, pointing out the benefits of Twitter, these quotes also start to dig into some of the benefits of using public tools. A lot of times there's some hesitancy on the part of professors to have students work out in the public space, and that's what I start to take away. One of the real benefits that I start to glean from this article that I really encourage you to read, you'll start to get a sense for, how amazing and how empowering it can be for students to step out of the LMS and to share their work. And even though they might be just, tweeting it out to a class, if they have other followers in their Twitter network, more people are going to see it and pick up on it and, give a thumbs up and say, hey, great job, and share it with their networks. And they'll start to feel that sense of validation and empowerment, or maybe engage in a critical conversation with someone about the topic. And that's really what the open web is all about. It's about conversing with others about what it is that you're sharing. And here we have 5 suggested guidelines for teaching with Twitter, which is basically my efforts to put together some guidelines that are kind of a combination of from 2 different case studies, one from Junko and Heiberger and one from Dunlap and Lowenthal, who have both used Twitter for their own teaching purposes. And first of all, it is suggested that you offer training if you're going to integrate Twitter. And I've seen evidence of this myself, of professors who have come to me and said, well, I've used Twitter in my class and it was a huge failure. And I said, okay, well, what did you do? Tell me about what was such a failure about it. Well, you know, I hear that all students are on Twitter, so I went ahead and I just said, okay, well, here, we're going to use Twitter, and nobody used it, and it was just a big failure. Well, you have to have parameters. You cannot assume, first of all, that all of your students use Twitter, because all students don't use Twitter. And secondly, you have to establish relevance. Why is Twitter important in your class? What are you going to be using it for? You need to be clearly communicating participation expectations. What is it that you expect your students to do on Twitter? Another excellent piece of advice is perhaps you want to consider making participation in Twitter, and however you define participation is important, but making it required for the first 2 to 3 weeks of class. There's been evidence that shows making participation required for the first several weeks of class, and that's something that you could manageably track if that's something you want to do. And then after that, don't make it required anymore, but after you have that several weeks of required participation, and the established has been relevant, it has been made relevant, and the students know how to use the tool, you're going to see a more significant buy-in, because the students will really start to foster those social connections, and chances are they're going to see more engagement through the tool. That's what the evidence is showing. Also, establish a process for grouping users or tweets. So, you know, that's one thing about Twitter that can be a little bit mind-boggling. Okay, so I'm going to have all my students use Twitter, but how are they going to see each other's tweets? And that's something that you really need to think through. So think about establishing a course hashtag, a search or a list widget, and I'm going to point out how to do that in just a moment, reference how to do that in just a moment. And you can embed a search or a list widget in your LMS, and that's an excellent way to just have it nice and clear in your LMS, and they can continue to tweet from their smartphones. Have students share usernames with you, and then you can actually share those usernames back, and that can be done really quickly actually through an editable Google Doc, so you don't have to actually do any of the management yourself. And then the students can access those names and follow each other themselves in their own Twitter account. And then also model effective use, so be an active participant in the process. So I've referenced hashtags. Again, hashtags are a really basic part of Twitter, but it's really important. And for anyone who watches TV these days, you see hashtags all over the place because the media has integrated them into the mainstream. Hashtags are a method for organizing or grouping tweets. Hashtags are not something you can follow, and that's really important to understand from the very beginning with using Twitter. A lot of times beginning professors using Twitter who I've worked with have come to me and they say, I don't understand how to follow my course hashtag. So it's important to understand that you can only follow users on Twitter. You can't follow hashtags. Hashtags are things that you search for. They make tweets searchable. Okay, so you can kind of think about them like keywords. So establish a hashtag for your course and communicate it clearly in your syllabus. Check Twitter to be sure it's not already in use. Because, for example, if you say, oh, I want my hashtag to be hashtag Art101, and you put it in your syllabus, well, there may be 5 other courses in the world that are already using Art101, right? And so that is what you need to find out if it's already in use. And the only way to find out is to actually go to Twitter and search for it. It's really that simple. And Robert's asking if I have tips for generating a unique but relevant hashtag for online courses. I really don't have tips, Robert. It's really just all about, you know, if you can actually have some say in what the name of your course is, you might have a better luck at going about it that way. You know, you really need to just kind of sit down and play with Twitter and do some searching and see what's in use. If anyone has any tips on that, feel free to share them in the chat box so that Robert can see them. That's where he's actually asking that question. And Peggy, I did see your question. You've asked a question about group chat and tweet chat, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. I'm not ignoring you. And include the hashtag in every course-related tweet and instruct students to do the same, because if you don't do that, then they're not going to come up in the searches. And Whitney has shared that she uses the first letter of each word of the course and then searches Twitter for it before choosing. Oh, that's a great idea. So IDML would equal Instructional Design for Mobile Learning, so kind of like an acronym. So that still makes it relevant but shortens it. And that's something that I should have said, Robert. The shorter the better, because the hashtags do take up, they do count in the 140 characters. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that, Whitney. So moving on to the tools for teaching with Twitter, I mentioned Twitter widgets. And widgets basically allow for you to set up a little feed or a little stream of either your tweets from a specific user. So if you were, for example, using your Twitter account to post announcements, so that would be a way for using Twitter to increase instructor-to-student interactions. Or if you had a list, if you went into Twitter and created a Twitter list, which is another feature within Twitter, you could create a list with all the students in your class. You could actually grab the code for that widget list and then embed it in your LMS. Or you could create a search widget. And a search widget would pull out all the tweets from Twitter that have your hashtag for your course. And one way to configure that would be to go into your Twitter account and enter the profile area of your Twitter account, and you'll see the option to configure widgets. And it's pretty straightforward from there. You just tell it which type of widget you want to set up, and it'll ask you some basic questions, and then you copy the HTML code, and you can place it right in your LMS. If you are a Canvas user, you do need to first install the Twitter LTI at the course or admin level because the Twitter HTML does include JavaScript, and so you don't want to embed it directly into the rich HTML editor. And if any of that sounds a little too confusing, then I encourage you to go reach out for some support at your local institution and just get someone to help you walk you through that for the first time, and you're going to see that it's not such a bad process. But that's a really cool way to go. Easy Chirp is a really fabulous thing to know about if you're going to be integrating Twitter into your class because it's accessible. And we always want to be thinking about accessible tools, and Easy Chirp is it's a secondary interface to Twitter. And so I would recommend having this in your syllabus if you're going to have your students be using Twitter in case you have a student who is disabled and needs to have the keyboard to directly interact with his or her web tools. And that's exactly how Easy Chirp is developed to be used. And so it's just a good resource to know about. I've actually used it on my own, and I think it's actually a beautifully clean and easy to use environment, and you may even prefer it on your own. And so this is TweetChat. But TweetChat allows you to set up a simple room, basically, and it's a URL, so you don't have to deal with going to Twitter and searching for your hashtag. It's a simple URL. So for example, as you can see in this screenshot, this one is for the hashtag eCommons. And so this was set up on TweetChat, and it's tweetchat.com/room/APCommons. When I first saw TweetChat, I was really excited about it because to me it really streamlines how to access hashtags. And if that's something that you want to use for your class, it allows for you to create a real streamlined URL and just plug it into your class. Now, Group Tweet is a tool that I haven't actually used on my own. It's one that I learned about very recently, but it's an interesting way to use Twitter in a private chat environment if that's something that you are interested in for some reason. I've talked with many professors who feel a little bit reluctant about using Twitter because it's open. So if that's maybe a better first step for you, you might want to explore this. However, I have it noted as a premium tool because when I look at the free options, I don't think that you could use the free tool with a group of students because it's too limiting. So I have it noted as a premium tool. But it basically requires you to actually set up a unique Twitter account. So you wouldn't want to use the one that you actually have. You have to set up a special Twitter account, and then it provides a link for that Twitter account that you share with the users that you want to have access to it. And then it's basically just a private space, and they send tweets to that group, that actual Twitter account that you set up, and only the users who are affiliated with that account, who have been invited to that account, can see the interactions. Oh, and Robin has just shared that TweetChat has been bought this week. Checking out the differences. Interesting. Always changing out there. And then HootCourse allows you to actually share private Twitter chats that may be embedded in your LMS. HootCourse is a little bit more emerging. It's free. Of course, when you use a tool that's free versus premium, there's going to be differences. So I think you probably understand what I mean by that. Beta, free, not as much support, but I've used HootCourse and it's actually pretty nice. I think it works pretty well, and it works very similarly to the one before this, I'm forgetting the name, Group Tweet. And so it's something to check out. Basically, you can also embed the HootCourse in your class. And if you are teaching face-to-face, there's a version that you can actually display in front of your class also, and that works pretty well, pretty nicely as well. HootSuite is actually more of a management tool that I think makes sharing tweets much easier, and allows for you to also schedule future tweets, which is a fabulous option. It helps you manage the tweets that you send to your students if there's certain things you want to remind them about. That's something to know about if you haven't used it before. And then I've got two tools that I want to share with you that push Twitter out into different types of activities. This isn't such an exciting poll that I've shared you as an example, but it's one that I used a while ago in my past in a course that I was teaching. But TwitPoll actually allows for you to set up really simple polls within Twitter, and so they get shared via a link. And so what I like to get instructors to think about is having your students generate polls that they could then share with the public. So maybe you could have your students actually poll the public about topics in your class, and then actually come back and use those results as discussion topics. And I think that becomes really intriguing because you're having them generate content and then pulling it back into your course and using it to prompt discussions within the course. So think about using Twitter in that way as well. And then finally, there's a tool called Vine, which is a mobile app, and it allows for you to create and share 6-second time-stop videos. And I know to most of us, we think about that and it makes our head spin, and we think 6-second videos, how in the world can you do anything with 6-second videos? But they're time-stopped, so you have to see Vine to understand it, I think. But I think you could do a lot with it. For example, what if you were to give a student an activity like identify a concept from your course, like something like cognitive dissonance, and then ask them to do one of two things. Tweet a photograph that you took that demonstrates the concept, or use Vine to create a 6-second video that demonstrates the concept. And by doing something like that, you're using Twitter to really kind of kick that thinking, higher order thinking levels all the way up to the top of Bloom's pyramid. And I think that's pretty compelling. And you can imagine that if students share those things with the class, those types of activities, those content items with the class, there'd be all kinds of great discussions going on in the class and interactions.
you.